programs that we have at Nefesh B'Nefesh. One is our Translation Tuesdays, which is you can register on our website for a slot to come into our office, our Jerusalem office, sit with one of us from the Answers and Advocacy Department to review bills, to review paperwork that you've received, not to review anything legal, but to perhaps help you understand better something so that you can be more independent the next time for whatever it is that you're bringing into us. And the other is our volunteers. We have volunteers throughout the country who can help you over the phone or by Zoom with so many different actions. And we invite you to please make use of these services that are available to everyone. Rifka is a CFP, a certified financial planner. She founded the Facebook group Living Financially Smarter in Israel. And if you're not on that group, we encourage you to join. And she is the author of Smarter Israeli Banking and helps people live financially smarter in Israel. And with that, again, I ask everyone to please mute yourselves. And thank you so much again, Rifka.
Thank you, Miriam, and thank you, Nefesh B'Nefesh, and thanks everyone for joining. So as Miriam said, I'm Rifka Lebowitz. I'm a certified financial planner, member of the Union of Home Economy Advisors in Israel, and I like to make finances simple for people to live in Israel. Whether they have money or they don't have money, make it simple, really get what's happening and live a financially smarter life. But the first question is, what is a financially smarter life? What does that actually mean? What does that look like? What do we need to know? So the first step is obviously awareness and knowledge, and that's exactly what we're doing here. We're upping your awareness to various things. It's also what very much happens on the Facebook group for those of you who are on it. And as Miriam said, for those that aren't, they recommend, is like you hear something, you see something, there's something financial going on, and you're like, I don't know what this is. I'm new, I'm an Ole. Ask the question on the group. We are there to help. And it's just also really inspiring, just as a side point before I get into my content here, to see how many people in the group are like, I'm making Aliyah now, and like no other country in the world would have, you know, people moving to it this way, asking these questions when there's a war going on. So I hope our hostages and our soldiers all come back safely, and we'll get started. So the economy in every country has the way it works, right? And if most of you are from the US, let's say I'm not, but I'm going to assume that many of you are from the US. You sort of, even if you're not financially savvy, let's say, or not into how finances work, you sort of have some sort of association with various things, sort of maybe subconscious knowledge or conscious knowledge. You might know, for example, that if someone lives beyond their means, they're doing it on credit card debt, right? Because that's how in the US, and again, I'm presuming that many of you are from the US, maybe not everyone, that if someone is living beyond their means, that's how it's done in the US. That's not how it's done in Israel. Now,
maybe I should just leave you guys.
I'm not saying someone's not.
No, we want to join the Zoom as well.
Yeah.
Please mute yourself. Thank you.
So we're talking about the things work differently, okay? If someone lives beyond their means, which obviously is not recommended, outside Israel or in the US specifically, it might be on credit cards. In Israel, it's going to be an overdraft, not recommended, but I'm just explaining to you that there's that cultural difference. Another cultural difference is that, you know, let's say tax. Americans know that they have to do tax. They have to report every year. And when I looked over the questions that Miriam sent me, so many of you asked tax questions. And I'm thinking, maybe you don't even know that possibly you don't actually have to report tax in Israel for many years. You may never need to report tax because your average Israeli doesn't do tax. There's no obligation in Israel to report tax. And these things become part of the culture and how people work things. Like, okay, tax isn't, you know, on the radar for your average working Israeli. Obviously, there are cases, you know, people own a business and whatever. I'm not getting into all of these where people have to report tax or money abroad, whatever. There are various cases where people do need to report tax. But reporting tax is not culturally something that your average Israeli is doing. So I want to point out with this that there's a lot of what I'm going to say and a lot of different things that go on with managing your money that are cultural differences between any country you'd have moved to, but specifically, obviously, with Israel. When I was studying to be a CFP, which you may recall, you may be familiar with CFP from the States because it's an international license. So we're doing planning for people throughout their lives. You know, we're planning how you're going to live until what we call in Israel, Ad 120, how you're going to live until 120. And we're taking all these things into account. And I noticed that one of the things they didn't take into account was something that most Anglos, when they make Aliyah, ask me about. Like, okay, well, especially if they're young families and have young kids, they'll ask me, you know, well, how much does it cost to go to college, right? Because there's a cultural thing that anyone in the US, particularly, who has kids, is thinking about if they have kids. Like, oh, what are we saving for our kids for? College, right? And Israelis, it's not on their radar. Do you know why? Because for Israelis, college costs 1,000 shekel a month. And 1,000 shekel a month is less than GAN costs. Okay, if you have small kids and they're going to go to nursery school, to kindergarten, whatever you call it, it's going to cost less than it's going to cost to go to a regular college in Israel. So culturally, Israelis are not saving for the same things that English speakers are saving for. Because culturally they don't need to. And when I was doing the course, as I was saying, and they're putting aside all these different things, we'll save for a new car every few years, and we'll save for a vacation, and we'll save for this, and we'll put this into account. And I'm like, well, what about bar mitzvahs, weddings? Not on their radar, just not on their radar, which was fascinating because there's another cultural difference that I just want to bring up. Israelis deal with many of these things differently because of the way the economy is built, because of the way society is, because of how the banks work, the credit cards. The whole system works a little bit differently, and therefore Israelis work differently. I'm not suggesting you all need to become, you know, Israelis and do it the Israeli way, because the Israeli way, I said to a neighbor once who's very Israeli, I was like, okay, so you don't save for a bar mitzvah? She's like, no, the checks will cover it. She just assumed that people's gifts will cover it. And that's a culture in Israel. I'm not saying anyone has to take that on, but I just want you to understand that when we're dealing with how things work here, it is slightly different because of some of these differences. So another thing that maybe, and that came up also in the questions, was a big thing, which is a very big cultural difference, is that most Israelis own homes. And that is the one thing that when we were learning and everyone's planning and how do you save for this and that, the one thing that Israelis really save for is to help their kids buy apartments. Doesn't mean you have to, doesn't mean whatever, but I just want people to understand that culturally is what's happening on the Israeli side, because after any talk I give like this, people are like, so how do Israelis do it? What do Israelis do? What does the average Israeli do? So you have to remember, we're not the average Israelis. We're English speakers. We're Olim. We might be doing things differently, but we need to understand the system, which is part of what we're going to cover today. So when we're talking about Olim trying to live financially smarter, there are a few areas that really sort of come up more than others where we're like, okay, you need to focus on this, you need to understand these things. So the 4 areas in general for financial planning that we work with people on, that we always want to get balanced, are the risk management, which I'll get into a little bit, the planning and growth, the aligning money with our values, which anyone who's made Aliyah has totally done, because moving to Israel is definitely about that, and the living within the means, which is more like the budgeting and that kind of thing. So those are sort of the 4 aspects that need to be dealt with. And then there's the technical side of things, which is more like, okay, but how does the bank work in Israel? So I want to start with some of these technical things, and then we'll, move them over to sort of the risk management and the planning and how to live within the means. So when it comes to banking, I wrote the book that Miriam mentioned, Smarter Israeli Banking. And when I was writing it, so many Israelis said to me, well, why would you write it in English? Why do you write it in Hebrew? Israelis also don't understand the system. So I just want you to know that if you have questions about banking and don't understand how the banks work, you're in good company. Many Israelis have the same questions, and nobody addresses those questions really. So let me explain and cover many of the questions we got about banking. So first of all, when you open an Israeli bank account, It has multiple compartments. You can have shekels, you can have other currencies, you can have loans, you can have investments, you can have savings plans, you can have all of this under one bank account. You don't need to open multiple accounts. So I was asked here, for example, well,
If I muted, will it be
someone is not
lines?
okay. When we're asked, when people say, okay, but how do I deal with an Israeli account? So just know that all of these sub accounts exist. You want to bring over money from the US and transfer it to your Israeli account. You don't need to go into the Israeli bank and open a dollar account. It's open. It's part of the account. The account can receive foreign currency, and the account can send foreign currency out of Israel. Might be expensive, might be more expensive than the money changers, but just know that that can be done directly from your Israeli account. When people want to transfer money into their Israeli account, I give a few tips. One is tell your bank in advance, not because you can't have dollars, let's say it's dollars or pounds or any other currency in your account, but because the money laundering laws in Israel are so strict that they're so scared when you send money, even though you don't have any requirement to report any money from out of Israel, you're allowed to have as much money there. You don't need to report it. You have a 10-year tax break for money from before Aliyah. They still want to know what's the source of the money. They want to make sure it's not money laundered. So if you're transferring, let's just say you're transferring a large sum to buy an apartment, ideally, you want to go into the bank in advance and say, I'm transferring, I'm just throwing out a number, $500,000. Here's proof of sale of an apartment. Here's proof it's in my name. Here's proof I reported tax. Do you need anything else? We've had people send money, large sums of money, and it gets stuck on the way where the bank's like, well, a minute, I'm not sure I'm going to accept this, because the banks in Israel are now the gatekeepers for the money laundering authorities. They used to be banks that would take your money and invest it, but now really they work much more on compliance and on being gatekeepers for the money laundering authorities. So that's if you want to transfer money in. Even if you're doing it via one of these companies, and there are reputable companies out there that can offer you money transferring services for cheaper, you may want to tell the bank that the money is coming in, even because it's coming into the bank, even if you're using someone else for the foreign currency transfer. So that's a recommendation. And the other thing I can recommend about foreign currency, again, because this is a question that comes up a lot, is if you have, let's say, Social Security income, you're a retiree, you have Social Security income going to come in, you can get that automatically deposited in your Israeli account rather than transferring it all the time. And if you do have other accounts, pensions, whatever, that are paying into the US, and you'll need the money in Israel, whether it's to pay an Israeli mortgage or to pay your bills here because you don't want to pay them on an American card, or you want to build up credit score in Israel, etc. I'm mentioning a lot of terms which I may or may not have time to get to regarding credit score. You might want to consider transferring money into Israel once every 3 months rather than every month, because there are fees involved in transferring, and that makes it cheaper. So that's regarding the banks from the point of view of transferring foreign currency. The other thing I saw we got questions is like, well, how could I make like a sub account, put money aside or save money? So if you're looking to save money, put it aside, not get much interest, meaning not invest. I'm not talking about money that you want to grow for you, but you just want to know that I'm putting this aside for something and I'm okay with getting relatively low interest, but something. The banks all have what's called pikdonot, which are bank savings. And you have the option to do a one-time deposit, a monthly deposit, depending on the bank. You could have it closed up for a day, which obviously is, every day you could open it. So that's the lowest interest. You could close it for a week. You could close it for a month. You could close it for 3 months. You could choose dates. All of these options are generally available. You can do it online yourself. So if someone's asking me, well, I just want to have an emergency fund, but not sitting in my account, I might say, okay, well, why don't you do a weekly picadon, a weekly savings plan? It's in the bank. You put it in on a Sunday. You can pull it out any Sunday. And it's sitting there and it's gaining interest and it's in your account. So yes, savings plans are available via the Israeli bank. They are doable yourself on the website in Hebrew. Most of the bank's English site is very limited, so you can't do that from the English site. And the only bank with an English app is Bank Leumi, and I don't know if you could do the savings plans from their app, but they are the only one with an English app. So that's regarding the banks. They work differently. They absolutely do. They charge for everything. In fact, there's a new law. I just posted this today on the Facebook group. There's a new law as of February 1st, although the banks are trying to get it pushed off to April, which I understand is what's happened, that the banks have to tell you how much you paid them on fees. And so every month you're going to get an SMS saying how much you paid them on fees, which I'm sure will annoy many people because you don't actually, you know, you're paying fees, but you don't actually want to see it. But it's a good way for us to maybe reduce our fees potentially by doing a track of fees that the bank offers, which is something all the banks have, where you get a number of fees in a track and you pay a minimal amount every month instead of paying per transaction. That's regarding banks. And now I think that pretty much covered all the banking questions we got. Yes. And now I want to talk a little bit about credit cards. So unlike other places, the credit cards are mostly linked to the bank, meaning if the bank issues you your credit card, then the bank is liable to pay whatever you use on the card. So let's just say you walk into the bank, you're a new Aliyah, they might not even give you a credit card. They might say you're getting a direct card, which is like a debit card. You have money in the account, it comes out immediately. But let's say you've worked your way up, you have an income, the bank says, okay, we're ready to give you a credit card. The reason they were hesitant is because they are responsible for paying the money out. So if you've no money in your account and they've let you spend 50,000 shekel on the credit card, they're now in trouble. They now need to run after you. That's why the banks are hesitant to give so much credit on cards. Then the second thing about Israeli credit cards that I think is just important for people to know is they're not really credit cards in the sense that most of them charge once a month and they charge everything unless you put something on installments, specifically on installments, which could be free or paid. Everything you spend on the card will come out at the beginning of the 5th, the 10th, the 2nd, the 10th, the 15th, the 23rd, depending on the card and depending what you choose. So it's a credit card, but it works slightly more towards what you might be more familiar with as a debit card. It's an excellent system, in my opinion. And the fact that it's not impossible to have debt on Israeli credit cards, but the fact that it's much more difficult is actually good economically for us and for Israel. So the bank, when they give you a credit card, will give you a certain limit on the card. And that limit, let's just say, is 10,000 shekel. And then you're a new Aliyah and you need to furnish a house. So you go and you buy a refrigerator for 10,000 shekel. You put it on installments of 1,000 shekel a month. And you say to yourself, okay, I have 1,000 coming out next month. But because the bank has an obligation to pay everything you put on it, they see it as a 10,000 shekel obligation and you won't be able to use your card. So I'm pointing this out. So as a new Aliyah, when your limit is fairly low because they don't know you yet, you either want to make sure that you have cards from abroad or that you put money aside in the bank so they give you a larger limit, or you have income coming in and you manage your account well, which means don't go beyond the overdraft they let, etc., so that you have enough limit on your card to live your life and use the Israeli cards. I think there was a question about the credit cards. Okay, non-bank credit cards, yes. So there's also non-bank credit cards. If you walk into Rami Levi or Supersal or Super Farm or many other places, they're always saying, do you want a credit card? So that has come to Israel, certainly. But before they give you the credit card, they want to know you have a bank card. If you don't have a credit card from the bank, you're very likely not to be able to get a credit card from one of these external places. And that card, the bank is not obliged to pay. If there's no money, it would bounce. So they normally give you a smaller limit than what you would get at the bank. And absolutely, someone asked about those cards. Absolutely, you could get one of those cards. You could then cancel your bank card if you really don't want it. But most people, their base card is going to be their bank card. And again, you can get other cards.
Rifka,
Yes.
before you move too much away from what you were speaking about in the banks, there was a question, what if you want to earn good interest on savings in the bank? Is there a way to do that?
So again, these savings plans that I mentioned, the Pictonot, so each bank has their own calculation of how much they'll give you on the Picadon. Right now, interest rates are the highest, the second highest. They went down 0.25% last month, but they're pretty high relatively. I mean, we had years and years and years of the interest rates being close to zero. So we're actually getting some interest on these savings plans. And there is a table on the Bank of Israel website that shows you what interest you could get. So if you're looking for high interest, you could look at that table on the Bank of Israel website. I can share the link with you afterwards. And it will show you what each bank would offer so that you know where you get the highest interest on your savings. So yes, it is available right now. And if we were talking a year or two ago, it'd have been like, it's 0.1%, it's not worth it. But now when it's, 2-3% or 4% even, depending how much money you have, it is worth taking a look at the Bank of Israel website and seeing the table on which banks offer the highest interest for what period of time, and then you can get high interest savings in your bank account in Israel. Are there any other banking questions before I move on?
Yes, somebody asked then, based on what you just said, is it even worth to earn interest? Does it then require a filing of Israeli tax return and pay the requisite accountant fees?
Okay, so Israeli tax, as I mentioned earlier, most Israelis are not doing reports. What happens in Israel is that tax is taken at source. So if you have a job, you might have been told your brutto salary, your gross salary, and then they take all the tax off and they'll just pay you to your bank account after tax. The same happens with investments, with most investments, like stock market investments and those kind of investments. Tax is taken at source in Israel. And the same happens with these bank pictonot, with these bank savings. The tax, which is generally 15%, is taken at source, meaning the bank takes it off. At the end of the year, there's a report showing a tax report showing how much they took off. If you do need to give in a tax report, you'll need this document. I think it's called an 847. And if you don't need to give in a tax report, which again, many people will not need to do unless they own a business or unless they earn over a certain amount or have a specific reason to give in a tax report, then no, they don't need to give a tax report. So you don't need to be considering, is this worth it for the accountant? Whatever you get is yours. Any other questions about banking before I move on, or credit cards before I move on?
What about taxes on income, on the dividends and so on in the US? I guess for 10 years we don't have to pay, correct?
I'm not a tax advisor, so I'd prefer you ask a CPA. My understanding is correct. You would not have to pay if it's dividends from things from before you made Aliyah. You don't need to report them until you're 10 years. But again, always ask US tax questions to a US CPA who lives in Israel. Okay.
Can I ask a question about
no, one second, please. Everybody, please put your questions in the chat. And
Okay.
as the moderator, I will moderate questions appropriately, okay? It might wait until the end because I don't want to lose our rhythm, but please put all your questions in the chat. And as Rifka said, and as we have said already in the chat, tax-specific questions, we can answer them, but we would want something answered by a professional, and none of us here are accountants.
The other one point before I move off credit cards, because I did see there were quite a few questions about it, and there always are, is when you go into a supermarket or you go into many places, they'll say to you, do you want to do this in payment? Do you want to do it in what they call tashlumim in Israel? Sometimes tashlumim are free. Very often they're free. So you could split something in 3 payments. I would not recommend that. Not financially smarter on something like your food shopping, because you still need to buy food shopping the next month, but maybe on some big items that you you're buying that refrigerator, you may want to do it on Tashlomim. Very often they're free. You need to ask. If they use the word credit, okay, which is credit in English, and it's now become a Hebrew word, when you're going to pay for something and they're splitting it into payments, they use that, you're paying very high interest, and that is not financially smarter. So with your credit card, it doesn't matter if it's a bank card or not a bank card, you want to be careful with these things that we call tashlomim. A, they eat your credit, they eat up part of your credit line, and B, if it's credit, you could be paying high interest. And as I said, most cards are charged once a month in full, so they're really a little more like a debit card rather than a credit card. Regarding points and things, I don't really want to get into that, but just know there are some cards with some points, not like the US where you get a point for $1 or something like that, but there are some cards with points. It's come up in my Facebook group before if anyone wants to search. The next
Can I
thing
make a point
Okay.
about Tashlumim and credit cards? Generally, Olim get very low credit limits on their first card, like 2,000 shekel, something like
Correct,
that.
I said that.
If you're going to a store and you're going to buy something for, say, two or 3,000 shekel, and you say, okay, they'll do it over two months or 4 months or 12 months, your credit limit has to be equal to or greater than the full amount. The fact that they're only going to take 500 shekel a month for 10 months doesn't help you. If the cost of your purchase exceeds the limit of your credit, you won't be able to do tashlumim.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you. So the next thing I want to discuss a little bit is the Israeli products. Okay, you're coming to Israel, you're making Aliyah, if you're getting a job, there's, the words get thrown around, pension, keren hishtalmut, gemel, and all these things. So I have a talk on YouTube, and I'm sure Nefesh B'Nefesh has 20 talks on this about what pensions are and what these products are. So I'm just going to touch on it enough so that if relevant for you, you can look it up on YouTube, on Nefesh B'Nefesh, wherever. So by law, if you're employed in Israel and if you're self-employed, you have to deposit money into a pension fund. Okay, so if you're working, you need to deposit money into a pension fund. The pension fund itself generally has life insurance built into it. So when Israelis are planning their risks and whatever, because there's life insurance built into their pension fund, very often they're not spending other money on life insurance. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's not right. They need more. They don't need more. Each person needs to judge that depending on their situation. But when Israelis, again, back to what I was learning at the CFP class, when I'm like, but they're not saving for anything for their kids and they're not paying life insurance. It's like a whole different structure of what people are spending money on. So just know that there are pension funds in Israel and that you have to, if you're working, if you've never had one before, after 6 months, they need to start paying your pension fund. And if you've worked before, they pay it after 3 months from month 0. So pension, it's something that you can choose any pension fund you want. Your employer does not get to choose that. You can work with their person. Very often they have someone they work with. You don't have to. And you can go to any company in theory that you want for a pension. In addition, there's an extra thing that a lot of people get from work, but not everyone, definitely not everyone, called a keren hishtalmut. It is a bonus to get such a thing, because the keren hishtalmut, if an employee puts in 25%, the employer puts in the other 75%, which is a bonus almost. And the growth of the keren hishtalmut, which is closed for 6 years, so you deposit in it for at least 6 years before you can touch the money. The growth on that is tax-free in Israel, but not necessarily tax-free in the US. So anyone from the US here that has a keren hishtalmut and hearing, oh, it's tax-free, I'll get all the money, just know you need to speak to your CPA about how they're going to deal with that, the growth there in the US. Regarding reporting it for tax. But from an Israeli's perspective, that's how they fund many things, like a new car, all sorts of things. Not saying it's the smartest way to do things. The smartest way is probably to leave it till you retire. But I just want you to know that that's an amazing tool. Anyone who is offered that when they're getting a job in Israel. should definitely look into, whether it's worth it for them, but very often it can be. Again, depending how your US CPA sees it regarding reporting. And those kind of things, there's also something called the Kupat Gemel Hashka'a, which is not relevant for Americans, so I'm not getting into, but those kind of tools are the Israeli tools, the pension fund, the Keren Ishtalmut, that relieve you from certain tax, because the income tax level in Israel is high. And those are the tools that Israelis use for their life insurance, for their pension, for saving, for having large sums of money for things. Those are the tools, and just being aware of those tools that Israelis use and Israelis have is very useful, because we're not talking in terms of IRAs and 401ks anymore. We're talking in terms of Kronot Pensia and Bituach Menahalim, which is an old type of pension fund, which isn't used as much anymore due to the costs. So just be aware of these terms and look into these terms a little bit more as you hear them, because they can make a difference and they can be important to building your financial security in Israel. And our next topic here that I'd like to share with you is budgeting. It's such a huge part of living a financially smarter life, not in Israel, anywhere in the world. Living within your means. Number one, basic, how do I make it in any country? Now, obviously, when you're in a new country, when you're in Israel, it's going to look different than it did outside. I've met many Olim who said, we made enough when we didn't live in Israel. We didn't need to budget. That's fine. But when you're in a new country and a new economy, and the balance of how we pay for things and what things cost is different, then it's very important, even if you know you'll be comfortable and even if you know you have enough money, it's very important to consider budgeting, and even if it's not tracking every shekel, I'm not into that, and writing down everything, but just knowing what your basic budget is so that you know that you really can live comfortably. So, outside Israel, a lot of times there's like, well, your property shouldn't be this more than this percentage of your income. I don't love those numbers because they don't always work. Like, I'll have someone come to me who's single, who's like, well, why can't it be 50% of my income? I'm really comfortable and that's fine. And you have someone take an opposite extreme with 10 kids who it cannot be 50% of their income because they won't be able to feed their kids. So I don't like giving percentages. What I will say is it's really important to take the prices of things into account, to translate. Let's say you're retired and you know how much income you're going to have. You're not even looking for an Israeli job. You have Social Security, you have an IRA, you have this, you have that. You know how much income. Translate that backwards into what kind of life that could give you in Israel. What does that look like? What does that mean? And take into account, this is the biggest thing, take yourself into account. What does that mean? Take your personality into account. If you're a big shopper, if you host a lot, then yeah, you're going to spend more money on those things. I keep being asked, okay, but what will a retiree couple spend in Israel? Well, that's like me asking, I never lived in the US, how much does it cost for a retiree couple to live in the US? Well, where am I living? Am I living in Manhattan? Am I living in North Dakota? I imagine the numbers are very different. Am I a huge spender and into fashion? Or am I, really not into that? So it's really difficult, because I know this will be a question that comes up. So what does it really cost? I can't give you a number. I can't give you an exact number. What I can say is take yourself into account. We are the type of people that eat out a lot. Put that into your budget. Okay, if you can afford it. If you can't, obviously you need to adjust your budget. We are the type of people that shop a lot. We're the type of, whatever you are, we're the type of people that don't buy much. I'll go to the shuk, buy some fish and vegetables, and I'm done. Okay, that's very nice. Put that into your budget. Reflect the budget. Reflect your life and who you are into your budget, and create a budget. The things that people fall on, the things that people are like, well, my budget doesn't work, I created one, is generally miscellaneous. Okay, we must have miscellaneous. Everyone has miscellaneous. You're one person, you'll have miscellaneous. You're a family, you'll have miscellaneous. There are always things that come up that don't fit in. Then there's the unknowns, the unexpecteds. They are expected. I don't know what is going to go wrong in my house. I hope nothing. But once a year, I'm going to call an electrician, maybe 3 times a year. Once a year, I'm going to replace my dishwasher, my refrigerator, my whatever, something, right? If everything's going to last 10 years and I have 10 appliances, chances are I'm going to replace one of them each year. Or if I'm unlucky, I'll have to replace 4 of them in 1 year. I have to put that in my budget. So if you are creating an Israeli budget and you want to make it work, you've got your miscellaneous now. You've got your unexpected category, which I'm telling you is expected. Then you're going to take the things that are annual. Let's say your car license. You're going to divide those by 12 and you're going to put them in your budget too. And then you're going to see if you can afford this budget now that you've taken all that. Does this work? Okay, I can't afford my budget. I'm earning, let's just say a retiree, just because that's easy. They have a set income and they know. Then we may need to figure out lower rent, moving somewhere, like if we're setting up, or for pre-Aliyah, setting up somewhere that's cheaper and more affordable. We may consider, you know, once we've reflected what it gives us, we can consider what things need to change to make sure it works for us. The other thing I really, really highly recommend is if you're from the US, or actually any country outside Israel, you will have noticed over the years, especially the last 2 years and the last 10 years, that there's a huge currency fluctuation, okay? The dollar against the shekel has been 3.2 for ages, went up to almost 4, went to 3.7, is now 3.65, 68, I think, today. There is huge amount of fluctuation. If you are relying on US dollars to live on, either because they're coming in as income every month, whether it's Social Security or a salary, and you want to convert that to shekels to see what kind of life you could live in Israel, use a low rate. I don't want anyone to calculate a budget at 3.67 at today's rate, which I think is today's rate, at 3.67, and when the dollar goes back down to 3.3, suddenly they're short of money. Okay, so always plan your budget taking foreign currency into account. It will make the biggest difference in planning, because the currency is going to move. We have zero control over it. So the least we could do is plan correctly and keep, keep that number low, could be 3.2, so that when it goes back down there, which it might post-war, whatever else politically is going on, it might go back there, could go back there, I don't know, so that your budget works no matter what the exchange rate is. That's budgeting. I see I'm running out of time, so what I think I'll do now is I'm going to move towards, I was asked some questions about investments and stocks, and then I'll open up for questions as per however Miriam would recommend we'll do it. So when it comes to stocks and investing, people keep asking, should I have money in Israel? Should I invest in Israel? How do I do it? How does it work here? So your regular Israeli will probably have maybe a stock portfolio with one of the big companies and buy stocks and mutual funds and ETFs and all of that, just like someone in the US might do. However, because many of these products, the mutual funds and the ETFs, if you know what those are considered PFICs, which is passive foreign income companies, it's a big problem for Americans to buy them in Israel. So what generally happens is, it's a tax problem, it's not illegal, but it's a tax problem and costs them a lot of money. So what generally happens is, for the first 10 years of Aliyah, most people are leaving their portfolio outside Israel, then they don't need to report it in Israel, and then they don't get stuck on what they can and can't invest in Israel. However, if someone specifically wants to bring their money over for various reasons, there are specific companies that will work with Americans, because many won't, and they know what they're allowed to buy and how to do that. So generally, I would say that most people from the States, if they don't mind leaving their money there, if their bank there is willing to have it held there while they're living here, which not all the banks allow, then that's probably what most people are going to do. And then you have time, once you've been here a few years, to learn about the Israeli market, to learn what's here, and to consider bringing it over either right before the 10 years or after, depending on what your CPA says. So that's how I wanted to answer the investment question. That doesn't mean people can't or shouldn't invest in Israel. You know, we're here, it's a growing economy, you know, there's definitely reason to invest here, but we just need to be careful, and we're generally not bringing over large portfolios, especially when we first make Aliyah. So that's that. So basically, if we want to live a financially smarter life, we're going to take the knowledge into account. We're going to, you know, manage our risks correctly, whether that's, you know, life insurance, pension funds, all these things to make sure we have. We're going to plan and grow, meaning we're going to save and think forward and invest in whatever it is. We're going to align our money with our values, which I think making Aliyah is absolutely. And we're going to live within our means. We're going to create a budget. We're not going to ask on Facebook groups, what does everyone live on? Because it's like asking how long a piece of string is. We can't answer that because we have to take your personality and you into account. That's it. I'm here. I'm open for questions, and I'm happy to, you know, try and answer anything and everything. Miriam.
So there's a question about mutual funds by way of the bank or elsewhere, as well as is there a limitation on investing in a startup, like in a business? I'll leave those two questions for now.
Okay, so when it comes to mutual funds, again, if the person is asking is American, then I would recommend not buying mutual funds in Israel. If they are not, because of this PFIC problem, if they are not American, then yeah, absolutely. You can walk into your bank, ask for a meeting with a person called a Yoetz Hashkaot, which is an investment advisor. They are licensed by the Israeli Securities Authority, and they're not selling you bank products. They're giving you genuine investment advice on the stock market and can tell you what mutual funds to buy. Or you can ask to sign to buy them yourself if you have the knowledge, and you can buy mutual funds from your Israeli bank account. There are fees. It's not the cheapest way to do it. It's probably cheaper to open an account with one of the investment firms. But again, not relevant if you're American. Regarding limitation on startup, I'm not familiar with any limitations. Please ask a CPA.
Right. I just want to encourage everyone that specific questions about mortgages and how to best acquire your mortgage, and also a lot of questions about taxes, accountant or mortgage broker is very much the correct address, just like we've asked Rifka to join us because she is a professional when it comes to budgeting and understanding the banking system. You want to be able to connect with a professional in the proper field that you are looking for. Rifka, what about those who would like to work on budgeting, but they haven't started employment yet, but they really want to sort of protect themselves at this point until they have the income from work?
So a few recommendations. First of all, set up a life that you expect that will be affordable based on what you expect you will be earning. And you know, set it lower than you expect. So you could always add. It's much easier to add expenses than to reduce expenses. And I think that, you know, for different people will translate differently. Like some people will be like, well, I'm, you know, likely that we'll both be working, which is very, very standard in Israel, that in order to make it, you have two people working full time. Okay, that's very standard. And you know, so you might say, okay, well, if two people working full time, we're likely to be working in Tel Aviv, so we need to live in the center. So chances are the salaries will allow you to live in the center. Obviously, you need to be aware of what your expenses are and really try and set up on the lower end so that you can always add but don't need to take off. On the other hand, if you know that you're likely to have jobs that won't pay very well, then don't set yourself up from the beginning on something that is just you're not going to be able to afford, and you're going to struggle, and you're going to say your Aliyah wasn't successful due to this. So I think being very realistic about what we're expecting to earn is part of the key for this. I think there are certain expenses that you might not want to commit to if you're a new Ole until you know what your jobs are. You know, you might want to say, I'm not committing to a car yet, or I'm taking a rental I don't want to buy because I can't commit to a mortgage yet. And I think that's very reasonable until you know where your earning potential is, what you're going to be earning, so that you could set yourself up with a budget that really works, which will really, really contribute to your successful Aliyah.
Excellent, excellent. There's a question about wills, which I know is not your area of expertise, but I will just share with everyone that whether your will is anywhere outside of Israel, yes, you must have also an Israeli will, which will recognize your will from abroad, but you should also have an Israeli will, an Israeli healthcare directive, and so forth. We do have an article on the NBN website about it, or just write to answers@nbn.org.il, who is our department. All right, more about taxes.
Miriam, do you
think-
think NBN could do a workshop on budgeting, since it seems to be a frequent request from many people?
So we had one. I was just about to put it in the chat here. I saw your question, Sarah. We had one maybe 2 months ago, and I will put that here. I'm going to find it and put it here. Any other questions?
Miriam, if I can add 2 things.
Yeah, please.
So first of all, I do see there's mortgage questions, and I just want to add and say that generally one needs to put down 25% down payment for a property if it's the first time they're buying property in Israel as an Israeli. So, and if it's not, if you've had a property and you're selling it, it's 30% down. This is amazing for the economy because it means Israel didn't collapse like in 2008 with a subprime type of thing, and your house is valued and they send someone to value it and they don't give you really high valuation, etc. They give a reasonable valuation. So it's good for the market, it's good for the stability. What it isn't good for is the people trying to start, like, because your average house is really expensive in Israel, and it takes a lot to get that down payment. And one of the questions I saw is like, how do you even start with that? Every case is different, but it's definitely something that anyone that wants to get into the property market needs some sort of plan for. Like, how am I doing this? How am I saving? And it could be a 3-year plan, it could be a 10-year plan. But how am I saving and how am I making this work? Because yeah, you'll need 25 to 30% down, and then you'll need to be able to afford the mortgage. And it can't be 50, 70, or 70% of your salary. It might be 25% or 30% of your net salary could go to pay off the mortgage. So those things have to work together. So I just wanted to point that out because there was a question. And the other thing I want to point out is, it's not even point out, just say we did a conference last year on January 6th, I think it was, with Nefesh B'Nefesh at Nefesh B'Nefesh, a full day of all these different financial things. We had budgeting talks and tax talks and everything. And we're doing it again on June 2nd, hopefully this year. So if anyone wants more details about all these different topics that have come up, you know, tell me what you're looking for. I'm making the schedule for the conference now. It's going to be at Nefesh B'Nefesh in Jerusalem. We'd love to see you there.
Oops, sorry. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. My bad. Last question. No, I'm sorry about that. That was my bad. Rifka was asked how people can get your book.
Oh, sure. So first of all, it's available on Amazon. Second of all, it's on my website, which is Rifka Lebowitz. Note, Rifka's with an F. An F is for finance, so that you remember. RifkaLebowitz.com. It's available on my website. It's available on Amazon, and it'll be available at the conference. I might even bring out a new edition by the time the conference rolls around. We'll see. But yeah, that's where you could get it.
Excellent. I want to thank everybody for joining, and please feel free to be in touch with us at any time at answers@nbn.org.il. I put it in the chat, and everyone will receive a copy of today's Zoom within the next few days. Rifka, thank you again on behalf of all of us, and everybody have a safe, good night. Kol tu.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rifka.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone, for your questions.